I'll share my screen because it's always a good thing to do. Trish, just to make sure you're recording this, right?
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Cool. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen. Um, let's see if I can share the entire screen. Now let's go live. Right. So essentially, what I wanted to do this week. So the reason that I sort of asked you guys to go through the four fits framework. Let's grab that up. Four fits. The reason I wanted you guys to take a look at this is because if you can kind of understand how this works, you sort of understand the entire engine that exists within the world of product. Because while product is technically only one part of the four fits framework, if you understand product and how to think about product, you will kind of understand all of these other parts because it's really, really, really difficult to do anything without in product, at least without thinking about how you're going to market it to people, e.g. the channel, how your customers think, e.g. your market, and the model, what they will pay to keep the business alive. And that's always a core part of this. Now, I actually think that the hardest part of this entire process is just this top part, which is kind of like market and product fit. I think that product channel, product model, it's like all of that stuff is one of those things where you can get really good at figuring that stuff out. And some people do get very good at it. But the thing that product people are always experts at is figuring out how to go to market and how to kind of like find a product or create a product that people love. And the rest will kind of like fall into place. And if it doesn't, and you already have a product that's really great and the market actually wants it, then you're probably making enough money to pay someone else to figure out the other problems for you. So I think about this stuff really holistically. And I'm like, right, if there was one thing that you could spend most of your time on, and that would 10x how you kind of like, move up through the world and create businesses, it's kind of like that product and market fit. And so that's really the main thing that I wanted to focus on. And so I dropped a couple of things in Discord earlier, and we're not going to watch them now, but I will just kind of like point them out to you because I think it's really relevant. So essentially, when you're creating a product and you're creating a really cool business, you sort of only really want to focus on a couple of things to make these, key to $1 million startup ideas. And I think Garry Tan summarizes it really well. Now, you should all watch this video, but there's three key things that he talks about. And he talks about new technology, new behaviors, and new regulation. So what that really means is there's opportunities in the market where there's, free energy, which you could gobble up and create a business around when new technology arrives. So something like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but let's open this up anyway. Chat at OpenAI is a good example of this. So let's just open up my AI account. Brilliant. It's like, it's so popular that it's down, which is a shame because I was hoping to share this with you guys, but we'll come back to it. And then when we're looking at things like new behaviors, that might be, for example, like the way that people purchase or do things. So, for example, like the rise of kind of like mobile e-commerce is a good example. Many businesses were created around like new behaviors around involving mobile e-commerce and new regulation. So, really interesting new regulation that I'll share with you guys is let's type in indie hackers EU rules. And then I should be able to share this as well. Cool. So I'll also share this because this is a good example of a new regulation that's popping up, which will give you a good idea for what you can start to do with new products. So, essentially the EU have basically created a rule that says, they want to stop this winner takes all dynamic, which means that big platforms have to open up APIs so that smaller platforms can integrate with them. The example they give here is, WhatsApp and iMessage will need to open up APIs and become interoperable with smaller messaging platforms, which is a nice way of saying you'll now get to play with WhatsApp and iMessage and build applications that leverage these services that you couldn't before. And so this change in regulation really means that, there's a whole slew of opportunities that didn't exist before. So, for example, Google Play, it's pilot third-party billing in new markets. So that means that, you can now make payments outside of Apple Pay and Google Pay directly on the App Store. It also means that Apple will have to allow Google Play on the App Store and vice versa. So there can be many app stores on these devices, which is really interesting. And then they have a few ideas here around other things that you can do to kind of like change behaviors. So, this law is enforced, which means there's a whole new like slew of opportunities that are going to come up that you guys can kind of, mess with and hack around with. So Garry Tan talks about that in that talk, and I'd really highly recommend reading it. And again, just to recap, it's new technology, new behavior, new regulation. Whenever you see these things, that means it's a cool business opportunity. You can start thinking about how this stuff works. Now, one of the things I wanted to touch on, I've created this fig jam board for you guys, and we'll kind of work through it together, is um, one of the things that Brian Balfour talks a lot about in his four fits framework is he talks a lot about, essentially figuring out what the market wants. Now, that's a really interesting way to look at the world because you have to do a lot of research and understand, what your customers want, think, and feel. So you have to do some research to figure out kind of like what's going on in the market, how they think, how they behave. But at the same time, the only way you can really identify the people that you want to serve is by thinking about, what you want, what you think, and what you feel. So you kind of have to find this beautiful middle ground in the middle of all of these sort of sticky notes where you find an idea that really excites you and you feel that you can see the future and think about how to implement that. And it also has to be something that lines up with what customers want. Because if you just listen to what customers want, one of the biggest problems you'll always have is that they don't really know what they want. Sometimes they know their problems, but you have to find this sort of like middle ground where you can say, okay, cool. I want to try this stuff. I want to try building this thing and I want to test it and I want to learn in the process. And then I want to re-engineer this thing. So maybe it's like you then have another idea and then you test it and follow that same process. And that's exactly what HubSpot did when they created Sidekick. They were like, okay, cool. We understand our customers. Let's try this and then let's update and let's change things as we get to know more. So what I really wanted to do with you guys is kind of like essentially take Gary Tan's methodology of, new technology, new behavior, new regulation, and just show you how I would go about kind of like starting to think about new ideas that would work. And what I really wanted to do was use ChatGPT to do it, because I think it's an absolutely amazing piece of software. And I think that, this is going to give you a good window into kind of like how about some very interesting technology that you can kind of hack around with. Here we go. Cool. So let's see if it lets me work. So one of the things about this program, if you've never seen it before, and you should get an OpenAI account to kind of hack with it, is by talking with ChatGPT, you can kind of understand like what it knows and how you might be able to leverage like its use case. Even if you're not the person building this, you get a good understanding of what it might be able to do. So it can do some really crazy things. So if I asked it, for example, what is the best way to design a new product, it's going to start giving me an answer. So say the best way to design a product is start by understanding the needs of your potential customers. And you see it's just slowly typing away what's going on now. And you can then ask it questions based on the things you've asked it before. So for example, it said, additionally, it's important to test your product with a small group of people. So I could say, what would you suggest is a good number of people to test with? And you see, it will start giving you answers to these questions. And this is kind of crazy because what it's doing is basically, crawling through its own neural network, which has been trained on blog posts, been trained on like vast stores of knowledge on the internet, if you will. And it's trying to give you what seems like a reasonable response. But it can do crazier things than this. So one of the things I would love to explore with ChatGPT, for example, is, something like this. So can you tell me a story in the style of William Shakespeare that describes how quantum mechanics works as if I was a 5-year-old? So what it will start to do now is it will start to write a story. And the really interesting thing about this story is that it will explain quantum mechanics as if I'm a 5-year-old in the style of William Shakespeare. You can see kind of hacking along. It's still going. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to go for. It could just, it's going to keep going forever. So quantum mechanics is quite hard to understand, but you can see like it did this with no problem. And so one of the interesting things that I might do with this is I might say, okay, this is a new technology that allows amazing things to be unlocked. New use cases, like crazy new stuff that didn't appear possible before. So maybe what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, cool. So what do I think would work here? Okay, can I use Chat GPT to build a story system for parents that want to educate their children on complex topics from home. But maybe that's kind of like, a feeling that I get that could work. And so when I have that feeling, I'm a bit like, okay, sometimes when you join a business, you're going to be very lucky because you're already going to have a gigantic group of customers. But when you're trying to explore something new or you're trying to start something from scratch, you need to try and figure out, first of all, who's going to buy this? And then second of all, sort of like, where are they going to hang out? So what I might start to do is I might start to type in, I might start to see there's some competitors. So I might go, Chat GPT story creator for kids. And then I might do the same thing with this. I might do AI story creator for kids. So I'll be like, okay, cool. We have Imagine Forest, 7 best AI story generators, free bedtime story generator, AI story generators. So I've started to basically do some market research first. Now, as you can see, this is a really clunky tool, but it's asking me a lot of information that I might be able to use to kind of generate a story. So I say, okay, cool. Like, that's one tool. Looks like Jasper's also written an article around this. So Jasper is a very big tool. I know that for a fact. So if they're doing this, let's have a look at features. So if they're at least thinking about this, there must be a market for it. Cons, can be a learning curve. Deep story. Okay, that's interesting. Let's have a look at deep story. Right, let's take a look at Deep Story. There's lots of users, stories, and scripts, but it doesn't look like it's targeted at parents. And based off of this, if I want to educate children, I'm going to have to start thinking about parents. So what I'll start to do is I'll then highlight the fact that it's parents. And then what I'll have to do is I'll have to make some assumptions. It's like I'll have to say, okay, so parents, how old is the average parent? Maybe I'll go, how old are average parents? And I'll be very specific now in, let's say, America. Right. So average age of first time mothers is 26 and the father is 31. So let's say, click on this as well, get some rough information. Okay. So you can see a map of average age of parents or mothers at first birth in the US in 2016. Married women. Well, I'm just working on the assumption that this is going to be a tool for married women as well, simply because that again, kind of just preference. It'd be easier to target families that are stable rather than unstable. So in general, we're looking at average home cost 32, average age of college educated women is 31. Okay, interesting. So the average age of married parents is about 32. So we'll do 32-year-old parents living in the US. And let's just, can we get any household income data? No. Average household income in US of first time family. Okay, average income was 97,000. Median household income, the more frequently cited, is 67,000. So again, like I don't need to be super precise at this point. I just need to start painting a like loose picture of the people that I might serve. That, and sometimes what I'll do as well is if I want to be able to come back to the sources, I'll just grab those and I'll just highlight them like that. So it's easy to look at where I got the information from. So we'll also grab this. And we'll just put that here. Right, so I still don't know much about my customers. I know that there's some tools that are doing stuff like this. I don't have any conviction that these are the tools that are targeting my audience. Why do I think that? Well, first of all, it's not targeted towards parents. These are quite complicated looking tools. There's no way a parent can use this. These people are like, while they're technical, they're not quite this technical. AI is still very new as a concept. So if we typed in AI adoption in 2023, for example, let's try out maybe how familiar are people with AI in USA. Okay, cool. This is actually going to be quite hard for me to figure this out. So what I'll have to do is create an assumption. So what I'll do is I have this little diagram here that I've laid out where it's like, here's some very important assumptions I'm making based on how strong the evidence is, weak or strong, and how, whether or not they're super important to this business existing or not that important. So what I'd probably do is I'd probably be like, okay, cool. Most parents in the USA are not familiar with GPT or AI tools. And I'd say that's very important, but I don't really have any evidence for that yet. I haven't found anything. But my whole assumption of my business is that, it's like parents are not familiar with this stuff. So all of these like non-sexy tools, it's like a parent really struggle to one, find this, and second, make any use of it. So we've now got bedtime story generator, Infinite Monkeys. Okay. Click here to navigate to Infinite Monkeys. Sorry, monkeys are on vacation. Okay, so this probably would have been targeted towards parents. Oh, it could have been. Oh, wow, what a creepy image. Look at what the hell has happened here. That's not really what I have in mind to solve the problem. Story generator. Oh, Imagine Forest. Okay, this looks cool. 100% free, safe for kids. Cool. So this product is clearly doing what I would like to do, which is cool. So, it generates like new starts. So maybe what I would do is I'd give it a quick go. So let's just create an account. Your login details are correct. Okay, cool. Let's register instead. Say I'm a parent. Cassie's Kiani. Have a quick hack through this. Let's just give a dummy password because I don't think I need to come back to the site. I'd like to receive free monthly newsletters. No, thank you. One number. Okay, let's add one number. Done. Oh, one capital letter. Okay, let's add one capital letter. Thank you. Please verify email address. Okay, let's do that. Welcome to Imagine Forest. Verify email. Okay, sweet. Let's create a story. What do they do? Okay, I'm a parent. Sign up today. Okay, that's not good news. Let's try again. Okay, so we have a dashboard for a child account. That's interesting. That's a nice feature set. All right, you gain the newbie badge. Right, dashboard, create child account. What if I don't want to do that? What if I just want to create a story? Okay, I'm saying yes to a lot of things. Write a story. Create a new story. Right. Chapter book, picture book, poem or poster, story generator. These are all cool features. So what I might actually do is I might even just take a screenshot of this and add it to my workspace. I have it as a reference later. And let's just do maybe story generator. 2 or more people or creatures. Okay, let's do cats and frogs and 2 or more objects, animal, creature. Okay, actually, so it's called Jason and Donald. Let's do cats, rabbits. Something can be eaten. Lemons. Okay, I don't really know what's going on here. So it's just a random complete, actually. Ladies, cherries, goblins, cupcakes. Okay, this is interesting because this isn't really going to generate a story I think I want to teach my kids, but let's try anyway. Okay, so this result here, I'm going to read a story of some ladies who stole some cherries. Okay, this is not what I have in mind at all. Like, this is not useful for kids or similar, but the UI might be worth seeing there. So I'll grab that. Now, one of the things they are doing well, though, is they are, in fact, yes, I want to close this, reload site. One thing this Imagine Forest people are doing well is they're targeting my audience. So let's see what I can learn by having a look at them on, let's say, TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Let's see if there's anything kicking around here. So on TikTok, they've created some stories, not massively useful for me to learn about the audience. Okay, they have some YouTube videos. Do they have any customer testimonials or anything that would actually be useful for me to learn about the customer's needs? No. Pinterest, same kind of thing, nothing useful here. Instagram, no. Twitter, let's see if there are any tweets and replies. Okay, so no engagement there on Twitter. Let's have a quick scan of Facebook. Okay, nothing useful here either. So what if we do Reddit Imagine Forest? So what I tend to do is, because Reddit is such a big community, I tend to just type Reddit and the thing I'm looking for to see if I can find anyone talking about it on Reddit. So Imagine Forest. Okay, so it's just telling me about people imagining forests, so that's not useful. Let's type in Reddit AI story generator kids. Best AI story generator. Very impressive how it can understand and generate text. Write my user story. Okay, so this is user story. That's not useful for me. Kids are going to get AI essays written for them. Best AI story for immersion. Huh. Okay, so no one's really captured this market. So at this point, I'd look at this and I'd be like, okay, no one's really done a deep dive into this yet. So let's, from a top-down perspective, it's like I know I can use ChatGPT. I know might be my audience. Also, if I'm going to say this, it's like they know how to use a computer and phone, which you'd be surprised. Like some of that's an assumption that we all make, but there's plenty of people that can't actually do that very well. But what your customers want, think, feel. Okay, so then I'll just type in parents Reddit. Let's have a look at parents. And what I might also type in is homeschool Reddit because I'm trying to create educational stuff. So if I'm creating educational stuff or kids education Reddit. Okay, cool. Parenting. So slash R parents, mini wife syndrome. My mum thinks that I am okay. Let's see if there's seeking a parent's perspective. Let's click on this tag. Where's actually see their privates, need help managing a 19-year-old. So there's a lot of things I could click on here that might give me useful information on the people I want to target. But it does seem that they're talking about issues that aren't necessarily of interest to me right now, the people I want to serve. I'll look at homeschool. Okay, cool. So homeschool looks more promising. Anyone advocating homeschool will not prepare the child, second language. Right, okay, so now we can start to do some interesting things. So, this person's looking for help, kind of like helping their kid learn a second language. So I could possibly reach out to this person and say, look, I'm learning to learn more about your needs. And equally, each of these people now that are commenting on this have a perspective on how to teach these kids a language. Now, that could be a good use case for my thesis of can I use ChatGPT to create a story-like system? And then we've got math. Okay, cool. Can ChatGPT create a story about math? Can you tell me a story in 100 words or less on how to add product, how addition works? I don't have to count. Should count everything 5 stars. Okay, cool. Huh. So this is interesting. So I haven't seen the results of this yet. It could be really spooky. This seems like a lot of words. But what I can say is that, okay, cool, that works. So for educational websites, I could use this as inspiration going forwards. Homeschool, math, science, catch up. Right, let's grab this. It's not it. Let's do math. So what you can see that I'm starting to do right now is after picking something that I thought could be cool, I'm trying to see if there are actually any user needs for this that might work and some kind of like verticals that I could hack into. And homeschooling appears to be one of those things. And 152k members on Reddit isn't bad by any stretch. I might then type in, for example, Reddit threads Reddit threads like homeschooling. Um, I actually know this tool. Let's see. I'm back on GitHub Reddit. I'm actually gonna see map of Reddit. Cool. I'm just gonna paste this. This is my experience has allowed me to cheat a little bit because I've actually looked at this stuff before. And I might type in homeschooling here and see what common subreddits it's connected to. So can I zoom out a little bit? Okay, cool. So homeschool is commonly connected to what the heck is SUP? Montessori. Ah, interesting. So Montessori, I know, is a type of school that obviously parents want to send their kids to. It's like I'll show you guys an example. Montessori school. I think it's like a school where they just focus on like hanging around nature and doing fun things like knitting and sewing. I personally don't think it's a very good school, but it's very popular in the West at least. So now I can see that there's all of these different threads that link to homeschooling and all of these different Reddits that I could start to explore, like science-based parenting. Like, for example, are there going to be people in there that I could talk to? And I have a feeling the answer to that is going to be yes. And let's grab science-based parenting. Okay. That's behavior, casual conversations, evidence-based input only, general discussion, medical questions, safe sleep. Huh. Resources helping 1-year-old deal with patience. Okay, it's a bit young because they can't read at this point. We can't tell them stories. But can you see that as I'm going through this, I'm actually also learning about other problems. So, you know, this might be what I want to build here, but as I go through things, I might actually start learning that a lot of people are talking about something else I could build in the process. So there isn't actually that much here that's that useful. But I can then sort of like go about and look at some other Reddit threads in the process and go for a map of Reddit again. So I can go back, go forwards, science-based parenting, attachment parenting. Let's just go back to homeschool. You see what else it links to. Raising kids. Okay, cool. That could be a good one. Raising kids. Slash raising kids. My first week, and I'm going to let them down. Okay, that's very cheery. 10 simple activities to help bond with your child. Okay, this could be good. This is upvoted somewhat. So what do people like here? You can also actually go to the top and look at sort of what's trending over this month. The recipe for sticky fingers. Some parents do my first week, and I'm going to let them down. Kids' business cards. Okay, this is quite a trendy post. My kid can down pretty social. She meets some friends with the kids. She doesn't have a phone or email or anything. Huh. There's quite a few people that upvote this idea. And what I could say is I could say, okay, well, this isn't necessarily what I want to build, but it's possible that it's like kids' business cards. Possible that my audience might buy into that. And there's actually quite a few people talking about this. It's a cute idea. Lots of positive feedback. Interesting. So what I'm trying to show you here is that when you initially want to come up with an idea, some of it is as simple as just trying to figure out if it's a problem for people, and if it is, how you would then sort of like go about learning about the problem and learning about the people, and sort of putting together an assumption, or at least something that's compelling enough. And as you start to develop some conviction, you can start to create basically this thing that they call a lean canvas. Now, a lean canvas is a really simple tool that allows you to quickly map out and model what the future might look like before you actually go out and build the thing. And the nice thing about a lean canvas is that there's basically nothing to stop you creating, open image in a tab. There's nothing to stop you creating hundreds of different ideas. But what this allows you to do is it allows you to essentially guide how you're searching for things. and how you might start to move around the world in order to create the product and find that product market fit. So, chat through the top three problems that you think that your customers have, the top three solutions, features that your solution will have. So for me, it might be, in this idea, it might be creating stories, allowing parents to print books, and it might also be allowing them to choose the subjects of the stories in an educational way. Key metrics, it's like, okay, what would success look like for me and this product? It's like, well, success really would be number of users on the platform and then number of paid subscriptions. And then perhaps I'd want something about virality. So, I want people to share this. So maybe I'll be like, for every 10 paid users, can I get one to share it? Cost structure. So this is simple. It's like you can put some estimates around how much it's going to cost to acquire a customer, how much it's going to cost to distribute the product, hosting, team that you would need to build this. Some of these costs, for example, can just be equity. They don't actually need to be cash. The customer acquisition costs, if you wanted to figure it out, maybe you'd say, okay, maybe I can market this with Facebook. So you could say cost to sell, and let's pretend books over Facebook. Just so let's say kids books over Facebook. Let's see if I can get the average cost. Let's see, Facebook ads, kids book, costs to acquire. Maybe will that give me what I want? Okay, average CPM. Okay, so again, I've got a little report here with some data I can pull on. So cost of Facebook ads the Facebook ads cost of interest books for kids. Okay, so CPM, like it hasn't explained what some of these things mean, but the average CPC for interest books for kids is 46 cents. CPM is 7.1. Countries in the world that does a lot of these stuff. Interesting. So none of these are US, but the US is quite expensive, so 17.6. None of this really tells me how much it's going to cost though. So maybe I'd look at a few other articles, or maybe I'd make a big assumption here around the cost. Either way, it doesn't matter too much. And then we've got things like, what's my unique value proposition? So what makes me different? Why me? Why now? Unfair advantage. So what can I build that's hard for someone else to build, or at least as the business gets forward, makes it more defensible? The honest answer is that I actually can't think of too many things that make this very defensible, because I'm using sort of like APIs. I'm ultimately using not much on my side that's like unique technology. Channels, path to customers. So again, we talk about channel market fit. Customer segments. So I've done a very small amount of work here on that side. And then revenue streams. So how is it going to make money? So that's a good question. Like, how do let's say kids books make money, maybe? Because I know I can sell it as a subscription service, maybe. But like, what does this look like? Okay, so it talks about royalties. Typically, it goes through publishers, but obviously, I'm not going to be able to publish a million kids' books, or am I? Am I able to use AI to generate lots of kids' books? That could be interesting. So, maybe I'll put that somewhere like here as a question. It's like, can I use AI to generate many kids' books on topics which would sell? E.g, Amazon SEO queries. Can I then sell them through Amazon or publishers? And as you can see, all I'm kind of consistently doing is basically trying to create a picture that allows me to share my idea with someone around sort of like how it might work and what I might need to do to make it work. And this is the fundamental part of product. So essentially, what I'm trying to do is I want to try to create a canvas or a map which lets me understand the territory. So a nice way to look at this is I kind of want to figure out if what I think is real, and I want to try and do as much as I can to de-risk whether what I'm thinking is crazy, and not possible, or whether or not there is actually a market for it. And if there is a market, can I build it, and is it worth me putting time into? So what I really would like you guys to do, and I'm going to kind of open this up to questions, so you can ask me whatever you want, and I can kind of help you in this process. Is let's see, what I really want you guys to do is get to a point where you can fill out one of these lean canvases, and I can share this FigJam thing with you. So if this is helpful, you can hack around with it as well. But I want you to fill out a lean canvas, and I want you to do it for an idea that contains GPT. And the reason I want you to do one for GPT and Chat GPT specifically is, first of all, you're going to have lots of fun asking it questions like, what's the best recipe for cakes? And watching it come up with answers. But it's a very new piece of technology which follows Gary Tan's train of thought around new technology, which will ultimately lead to new behavior and possibly new regulation as well. But right now, the strongest thread is new technology. So if you can keep an eye on what's going on in the market, and ChatGPT is a great example of this, and say, right, I'm going to just do some research, come up with some ideas. I'm going to fill out a lean canvas for an idea that's led by ChatGPT. Then you can start to figure out what you need to do to get to the point where you understand the difference between your map and the territory. And you can then see, it's like, if what you think is what the customer wants, and vice versa. And I think this is a really useful exercise because it comes all the way back to the forfeit, and it focuses really on this top half here, which is the most important. So can you ultimately get that right? And can you start learning how that works? Now, I have lots of hacks, tips, tricks, and the reason I've recorded myself sort of like doing this process with you guys on the fly is because I'm trying to show you how I might go about tackling it so that you can get an insight into not only how I do it, but also why I'm doing it, which is why I'm talking as I'm going through this. I could have created a very nice deck for you that says a few things, but it is much less useful than to be able to see. It's like, oh, cool. Well, I find this and I dive down this rabbit hole and I look here and I look there. For me, Reddit is a very good place to start doing some market research. And once you start to kind of like, do market research with Reddit, put together a lean canvas, well, then you can start to be like, okay, cool. Like, what big assumptions am I making? And then, which are the important ones where I don't have a lot of evidence that I'm going to need to test? And that's my, that's week 2 for the product forum, kind of like starting to get to the point where you can have conviction on your ideas and work with new technology and ultimately put together a lean canvas to start thinking about what the world might look like if you were to create this thing. And the reason I like these types of activities is because if you're doing something from scratch, it doesn't matter if it's like for a big idea like this or if it's in a like existing company. The best part about this is the process almost always looks the same. All that changes is how broad and how creative you have to be in some situations. Because if you're, for example, Stripe, the PMs at Stripe will probably follow a similar methodology to this. But the main difference is that Stripe has a very fixed kind of like scope that it wants to tackle, has a very set vision. And so their products will correspond with those visions. And so you would likely spend a bit more time looking at existing data and also what might work based on the customers that you already know you need to target and you already have a good understanding of. Whereas when you're doing something from scratch, you need to kind of like understand and invent that stuff yourself, which is a great challenge. And if you can do it from scratch, I promise you'll be able to do it for a big company like Stripe. And I think that is, how do I get back to this? Product learning forum. Cool. And that is pretty much a wrap for this week. And that's how I would tackle this process. So guys, if you have any questions, like, feel free to hit me.
Yes, I think I have a question.
Yeah.
So should we take into consideration how much the market we're trying to target is willing to pay?
Absolutely. What you should probably try, well, I mean, there's a couple of ways to do pricing. So the interesting thing with pricing is that you've got a few different ways that you can calculate this. And I actually think pricing is really hard. So if I was to give you like a couple of like loose rules of thumb, you might want to say, okay, how much is it going to cost me to, put this stuff together? And if I was to then decide that I wanted to make at least 50% gross margin, so, money after cost, it's like, what would that look like? So if you have like a rough idea, then it might cost you, let's say $10 to generate a story. You might then say, cool, like I want to make at least another $10 on top of that. So I'm going to say it's going to be $20 for a story. It's not going to be that much, but this is a hypothetical example. Now you can take another approach, which is kind of what you're suggesting, where how much is the market willing to tolerate? So you might then say, well, actually, like I'm just going to pick a price that's kind of middle market or upper market or lower market, whichever you feel like you kind of want to see if you can target. And then you might say, right, our costs are a fraction of that. Let's see if people will pay what they're already used to paying for something that's going to cost us lots less money to generate. And pricing is one of those things that requires quite a lot of testing. So you might be able to initially come up and say, look, we have a great business model. And in your like canvas, it might just say something. You might be able to be like, this is why it's a great business. And that's fantastic. What I would say is that there's a lot of pricing opportunities that don't make a lot of sense until you've done a lot of research around them. So for example, we started to touch on publishing models just very quickly when I was giving you the example. So it's like, oh, cool. Like, it's not just about how much could I sell this to the customer for. It's more about, could I also kind of like, generate some kind of publishing platform around this? Now, one thing that you could do, and this is what I mean by product is really crazy, and you can come up with ideas, is why not create a platform that allows other developers that really, really, really want to generate cool stories to basically like drop their algorithms on your platform, and then to, basically do a rev share with them as users start to use those algorithms to generate new stories. And that's what I mean by pricing is kind of weird, because pricing goes into the business model, and then the business model can kind of like change based on the customer research that you do. And that's kind of why we're talking about forfeits. You're talking about, okay, cool. Well, what's the market willing to tolerate? What can we do? What's new? What's novel? There's lots of different examples. So I can't really give you an easy answer of pricing. I would say usually, at least in a canvas, the simpler the better. Does that answer your question in like a meaningful way, or did I kind of like throw a bit too much at you?
Oh no, that's I think I understand. But also I think the problem that my tool solves has a big impact on this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So for example, if you're solving a problem for a company, it's very expensive for that company to solve. And there's no reason why you wouldn't turn around and try and say to the company, look, we're gonna charge you this much because we're saving you this much. So to give you an example, the last company I co-founded, Mora Medical, it's a healthcare company, and because it helps people reverse conditions like type 2 diabetes, etc., it actually saves insurance companies quite a lot of money. So for every person that isn't diabetic anymore, we might save an insurance company $1,000. So if we go to the insurance company and say, okay, we'll save you $1,000 for every single person that uses our program, and in return, we're going to charge you $750. So, our actual program costs are much lower than that per month. For example, it might cost us $150 per month to work with those people and to reverse their diabetes. But the insurance company, it's like we know what they're paying, and so we can kind of like strike a deal. So some business models do really lend themselves to that kind of thing, and are very, very useful in that sense. So yeah, ultimately the product does somewhat dictate the pricing and business model that you would use. Because again, it's kind of like, what's the market used to? What is it willing to tolerate? Sometimes you can do new and novel things as well. Kind of like AWS was very new and novel. If you remember, AWS is really, really cheap for what it offers. Whereas previously, it's like if you had to spin up your own sort of like simple storage system, it would cost loads, and it would not be simple by any stretch. And so for a couple of pennies to be able to start using AWS is pretty amazing. And that was very new and novel as a business model at the time. There wasn't a lot of sort of like, API driven services back then. So yes, I completely agree with you. You just need to understand, you just need to basically hack around and maybe again, look at what your competitors might charge or people in a similar industry. Like, how do they make money? What does that look like? Is there anything I can borrow from them? And if the answer is yes, steal it. Like, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You can just find a really good business model that might work for your industry and just go and test it. A lot of this stuff at this stage is just making good assumptions and then allowing people to kind of like critique those assumptions, if that makes sense.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I also have a question. Because that was really a lot, like really a lot. You really touched a lot of aspects. But I want to clarify, like, what we are doing is just picking any product in any company and based on the technology, which is Chat GPT or AI, we just based on assumptions which we research, we just test them, right? Just want to get it clear.
Yeah, of course. So how I'm looking at this is one of the hardest parts about product is being able to kind of like try and see into the future a little bit, because part of what you have to do is you can listen to kind of like customer needs and wants. But when you're first getting started with anything, the trouble is most customers don't really know what they need and want until you show them. And so you have this weird dilemma where it's really, really good to know your customer inside and out, but you have to take a small leap of faith somewhere. And so that leap of faith will typically come from you as an individual. That's my experience here. Is I've actually seen very few products that have been like very, very good that have come from a customer saying, I want you to build this thing. Now, they will tell you to build features, and those features can go into your product, but the core product, the like big change that you're going to make, it rarely comes from customers. So the activity that I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take Chat GPT. I'd like you to think about, you know, how could this be used, and maybe pick an area that you're really familiar with and you would think that I understand this space quite well. That's always a good place to start because it's a bit less scary. And so how could this be used? And, you know, what could I then do to kind of like figure out if there is a business for this, or if there is a group of users that would actually value this? And then to start doing research around like putting together a lean canvas that says, look, this might be a good idea if we move in this direction and we do these things based on this new technology, which is creating new behaviors. So that's what I think would be a really good activity for you guys, because if you can do that, or at least put together a canvas, what we can sit down and do is we can do in the next session like a basically a product crit. So I can ask you questions around your thinking on the canvas, like what makes you think it will work, and then that's pretty much how product tends to work. You tend to kind of like create a small map of the world, make some assumptions, you share it with people, you socialize the ideas, and they're going to help you basically refine it into something good. And they're also going to ask you questions that you might not know the answers to. So you'll have to go out there and figure those questions out and then decide what you're kind of going to build as a first step from there. So that's kind of the reason I would get you to do it like this and why I think it would be very useful. So use ChatGPT. Think of some cool ideas, ideally ones that you'll kind of like have some conviction in and you know feel like you have some understanding of. Do some research to see if you can find those problems in your customer audience. There is the caveat that we don't have customers to speak to, but again, like you can figure out how you would get in front of those customers to speak to them, and you can do some secondary research like I was doing through Reddit and Twitter and other customer conversations, and then put together a lean canvas that says, look, here's my map of the world, and I think this might work. And then we can all talk about it and we can try and figure out how to make it better and how to improve from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Makes sense a lot. Yeah. Works well. I get now.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, this is loads of fun. So to put this into perspective, this is exactly what I do whenever I want to start a new business. I kind of just hack around with trying to figure things out. And just so you guys feel more comfortable with this, every single time I create a first draft of anything and I share it with people, everyone gives me feedback, which is like, this sucks. Like, what do you mean? How did you come to this conclusion? Like, this isn't right. Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, this is amazing, because when you get that kind of feedback, it helps you refine your thinking. And I think that the trouble is when you're coming up with new ideas and you're attempting to explore a new space or create something which is actually going to be useful for people, the trouble is that that's very hard to do. And most people think that, you know, they can get it right first time. And really, it takes a lot of very smart people to look at these things. And it takes a lot of thinking to get to the point where it's actually good. And so, you know, just so you guys feel safe, it's like everything that I create for the first time, especially around this kind of stuff, always sucks. And I say share it with other people and they make it loads better. And after about 3 or 4 iterations, it's like, hey, it's actually like not bad now. And then we can start making some good decisions off of this stuff. And that's why it's nice to do like lean work, like small amounts of work that allow you to share things with other people, because that way you can move very quickly. Because if you both spent 6 months fucking around with a business plan and like trying to figure out a market, it's like you could do that, but it's much faster to share it with other people and get their feedback and to be able to socialize what's going on in your mind with people who would actually be able to help you. Because instead of spending 6 months and realizing that, you know, you've just gone completely off course, you can spend a day and then people will course correct you, and you can learn more in 6 weeks than you could in 6 months on your own, hacking around on the internet, trying to figure things out. So, you know, I hope that gives you some solace here. It's hard. And even to this day, most of the time, the first things I create suck. And so, you know, do your best and we'll hack around with it till it's really good, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Well, then I guess the only thing I'd say is any final thoughts, questions, anything you guys would like to kind of like run through?
I don't think so from my side.
Not for me too. Not for me. I really got it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to this. This is actually this is lots of fun. So, I'll obviously be on the Discord. Like, if you guys want to ask any questions or drop anything in there, like, let me know, and we can kind of like hack around, and I can share my thoughts and how I might tackle something. Anyone link? I'll also just drop the Figma file in there as well, so you can kind of like see how I would start to lay things out. There's absolutely no pressure for you guys to use Figma. It's like, you know, if you're not familiar with it, it can be a bit of a complicated tool. If you feel like using a Figma board is useful for you, please go crazy. But there's lots of other free tools you can use that, you know, you just need anything that allows you to drop your thoughts down and make sense to you. Could be Notion, could be a notepad. It doesn't matter. Like, none of that matters other than the kind of canvas you create. Perfect. Cool. Well, I'll just drop an overview of kind of like my expectations in the, you know, practice and feedback section, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Appreciate it. All right. You take care, guys.
You too. Thank you.
See ya.